Speaker McCarthy, thank you for joining me on Bloomberg TV. Many people doubted you were going to be able to get this bill passed through the floor. You proved them wrong. You successfully got it through the floor. 217 voting in favor of you. President Biden, though, says he's only going to meet with you if you separate the fiscal spending cuts, the budget, with the debt ceiling. So what comes next?
Well, I don't know, because it was 85 days ago I sat down with the president February 1st talking about finding a sensible, responsible way to raise the debt limit and make us less dependent on China, curb inflation, and bring growth to this economy. And that's exactly what we just did. The president then said he wasn't going to meet with me until we showed him a plan. So then I showed him a plan, and then we passed it. You know, the way government works is the House passes the bill, the Senate passes a bill, and then you conference together and the president can decide whether he signs it or not. The challenge here is the Senate's done nothing. But I shouldn't be rude. They did name March Maine Maple Syrup Month. They did get that done. But they haven't done anything on the debt ceiling, and the president has ignored this problem. He's actually putting the economy of America in jeopardy by not doing anything, because only the House has raised the debt limit, passed a bill to do that, and at the same time grow the economy. And we did it with ideas that he has voted for, work requirements. He voted for that as a senator, but more importantly, just a couple months ago in Wisconsin, it passed with 82% of the vote to limit our growth in the future so government doesn't get out of control. Well, that's an idea from Joe Manchin. We help the supply chain. We repeal 87,000 IRS agents. We make America energy independent. We cut the red tape so we could build things again in America. I don't think that's radical. And the words that are coming out of the White House that we are going to melt children's bones, we're going to create asthma, there's nothing in the bill that does that. It actually protects veterans, protects our military, makes us curb inflation, but keeps us at a stronger pace for the future.
So Biden didn't say, though, show me a plan. He said, show me a budget. This is just a proposal, but it's not exactly a budget. But he is signaling an openness if these two were separated. So why not just pass a debt ceiling? This is what Congress is scheduled to do and has to do for the full faith and credit of the United States. And then at the same time, have those negotiations regarding a budget for the fiscal year.
Okay, well, let me just clarify to your viewers so they don't get mixed up like you did. A budget has nothing to do with the debt ceiling. And so you said we should pass increasing a debt ceiling. That's what we did yesterday. We increased the debt ceiling by $1.5 trillion that goes into the next year. We also helped grow the economy, curb inflation, and make savings. So we did everything everybody requested of. And what people really need to look to is the president has done nothing. He's ignored it for 85 days. And if you wonder, has this ever been combined together? Yeah. Has the president ever voted for that? Yeah, he voted for it for 4 times. And the 4 times he voted against the debt ceiling, you know why he said he did? Because he wanted to see more fiscal changes. He didn't want to vote for a clean debt ceiling. Every single time we move forward on the debt ceiling. Last time, Nancy Pelosi said she wouldn't raise the debt ceiling without the economics, the spending decided upon. We watched Chuck Schumer say the leverage all he has is to deal with the debt ceiling. So I don't know why they're changing everything now. The debt ceiling negotiations in 2011 were called the Biden talks. Biden ridiculed anybody who wouldn't sit down to negotiate. So I'm not sure if he can't remember what he did in the past or what he said in the past, but the one thing I do know for history is we have never defaulted, and the House is the only place that has taken an action to already raise the debt ceiling, pass that through the House, and actually put an economic plan that has savings. We're at $32 trillion in debt. That's bigger than our entire economy, 20% bigger. The current Congressional Budget Office says we're going to pay $10.5 trillion just in interest in the next 10 years. But compare that to what we've paid since 1940 till today, 83 years, only $9 trillion. If we continue down this path, for the first time in the history of a 10-year window of any president, transportation, Medicare, and Social Security go insolvent. So he's actually cutting those programs and just sitting there ignoring it, treating it like he treats the border, ignoring it, think it'll go away. It will not go away.
So you want these two issues to be congruent with each other, and you want budget talks to go alongside raising the debt ceiling. What the White House wants is separate discussions. But Congressman Ralph Norman told Political Playbook that in a bid to win, all your conferences support that you promised conservatives that the debt ceiling bill they voted on yesterday was a floor, not a ceiling, and that you would personally oppose a fight against any debt ceiling agreement that does not include all of the red meat provisions in the House bill. If this is the floor, where is there going to be even room for compromise between you and the White House?
You know what? I'm taking exactly what Nancy Pelosi said as the last speaker, that just a debt ceiling vote cannot pass the floor without dealing with the budget. We're at a $32 trillion deficit. When are we ever going to take this up? The Democrats had added $6 trillion. The president wants to spend more money than he spent during COVID. So let me ask you this. To the American public, more than 70% believe we should sit down to negotiate. That's the design of government. But should we actually save money too? Is there nowhere in government that you can save money? What about the billions of dollars that have already been appropriated for the pandemic? The president signed a bill this year that the pandemic has ended. If this money has stayed dormant for 2 years and not spent during the pandemic, why should we spend it now? That's the hard-working taxpayers' money. Why wouldn't you claw that back? We have a supply chain problem. So why wouldn't we help people get jobs? What work requirements actually do? For those who are able-bodied with no dependents, something the president had voted for before. Why don't we protect so we don't have inflation in the future and actually curve how much government can grow by? It grew by 30% under the Democrat control. So we cap it at 1%. That's an idea of Joe Manchin, a senator and a Democrat. Did you see what Joe Manchin said today? He said if the president does not sit down and negotiate with the speaker and myself, that the American public will blame him for the first historical default in American history. And that's exactly what has happened for the last 85 days.
Yes, and he also talked about a common sense compromise.
That's
so my
right.
question to you, if there was a compromise, do you think you're going to have the unity in your caucus that you were able to receive last night?
You know, that's a great question because that's the same question I had all week, whether I could pass this bill. You know what happens with a compromise? We can get something together. It's what I sat down with the president the very beginning in February 1st. I said, Mr. President, why don't we sit down and work through it? There's two things I will not do, Mr. President. I will not raise taxes, and we will not pass a clean debt ceiling. But we can talk about everything else. We could spend less money. We could secure our border. We can make ourselves energy independent so we make more jobs. We could do work requirements. We could claw back COVID money. All of that could save, and we could try to come to an agreement. The only way that you can come to an agreement is if the other side has any ideas. I produced our plan. We proved we can pass it. Show me what yours is. The Senate has done nothing. The president has done nothing. So tell me, where is their compromise? We're the only people that have passed a bill that will raise the debt limit so we won't have economic and a default. The president has not. So I'm not quite sure what he's doing.
Well, the president did put out a budget, and he has said that he was waiting for the Republican budget. But I do agree with you in the sense that this is an opening salvo of these negotiations since you were able to pass this plan. I'm guessing the White House has yet to reach out because I saw their statements. I just want to quickly ask you, though, because at some point the Senate, well, they're not going to, they say it's dead on arrival. But what do you make of Mitch McConnell, your colleague in the Senate, minority leader? He has really deferred this to you. What kind of role do you think he can play in these negotiations?
Okay, but before I answer that, we have to clarify. You have said something twice about a budget, okay? You have to understand this is not a state capital. When we pass a budget in the House, it never goes to the president. A budget resolution is not binding. You can pass a budget, but it doesn't raise the debt limit. So don't confuse a budget with a debt limit. We are coming up on a debt limit here in June or July. That's where the default raises. So what the House did was the action to deal with the debt limit. We produced a plan that would limit, save, and grow. Now, to your other question about Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans, they are saying the exact same thing. They support our plan. They're telling Schumer, why don't you produce something? They're telling the president that he needs to sit down and negotiate. That's what the majority of America is saying. America believes, regardless, it doesn't matter what party you're in, you should sit down, find common ground, come back with a responsible plan that could put our economy back on the right track, curb inflation, make us less dependent on China, secure and protect Medicare and Social Security, and raise the debt limit. That's what we've done in the House, and that's what I'd like to talk to the president about.
You mentioned Medicaid. I know that this bill also accelerates some provisions to next year instead of 2025 in access to Medicaid. And I'm sure you've seen the ads. The former President Trump is running now against Ron DeSantis. President Donald Trump is saying that he wants to keep Medicare and Social Security, and he's going after Ron DeSantis and what he said in the past on that. Do you think, given this bill does touch Medicaid in some respects, the House Republicans are going against the leader of the party?
Okay, again, I don't want to correct you, but you said two different things here, okay? You talked about Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. Those are three different things. In our bill, it only protects Medicare and Social Security. Currently, the president would cut it by doing nothing. Medicaid, all we do within Medicaid, if you are able-bodied and you have no dependents, it gives a work requirement. Now, what does that actually mean? 20 hours. That means you could go to school for 20 hours. That just means you're looking for a job. It helps you that we find every statistical point in the past, it puts more people to work. This is the exact same thing that Wisconsin, just a month ago, had an election statewide where the Democrats were very successful. They overtook the Supreme Court, and on the ballot, there was a work requirement for Medicaid. It's paid half by the state and half by the federal government. You have an FMAP, not exactly equal there. But what it does is it passed by 82% of the vote. So you know what's interesting here is this is what passed and was signed into law with Senator Biden then with President Clinton. So yes, we think this helps people to move them into the workforce, help the supply chain, and you know what happens when they get that job? They're paying into Medicare and Social Security. Those were the two things that President Trump was talking about, and so our plan actually strengthens those. What President Biden is doing is automatically cutting those because they become insolvent if his budget is put in place.
I want to quickly ask you about something else that's circulating today. Russia TV has been airing this video of the Fed chair, Jay Powell, who he thinks in the moment he's talking to President Zelensky, but it's actually his Russian pranksters. There's been a long list of foreign officials and politicians that these pranksters have gone after. You are the Speaker of the House. I'm curious, have you ever been approached by these individuals? Have you ever gotten an invitation to maybe sit down with a Zelensky or someone from the Ukrainian government?
Now, I haven't sat down with real Zelensky, but I have had the pranksters try to get me, and they did not. My staff actually did the back work and found out they were pranksters. But there's a long history here. We had Adam Schiff fell for this and said some really stupid things. And he did that as the chairman of the Intel Committee. Which was shocking to me that he would do that, or the things. But he was so driven to go after President Trump at the time, he would talk to anyone and believe anything they would say. Now, they just did this to Jay Powell with the Federal Reserve, which elected officials need to be warned and need to do double checking before they take these calls so they have a clear understanding.
You also leave for Israel this week, and I know you're going to be addressing their parliament, their
Knesset.
Lawmakers. Yeah, Knesset, excuse me. There's a great deal of angst at the moment in Israel, though, and of course this has to do with the judicial reform. I know you've socialized your support for Prime Minister Netanyahu, but what do you make of him still wanting to continue to put this judicial reform in act?
I think he needs to have judicial reform in there. You need a check and balance. You need a rule of law to be able to be successful in any country. And so I think going forward, what he found was he's got to find some common ground. But the unique thing here is their leader, their prime minister, decided that he would sit down and negotiate. That's what you do when you have differences of opinion, which I think is right. I'm going to Israel for the 75th anniversary of the creation of Israel. They are honoring me with the ability to speak along with Netanyahu at the Knesset, which is only the second speaker able to do that, to talk about the values and the relationship that America and Israel has. The only democracy in the Middle East, the strength of our two nations. You know, America recognized Israel within minutes of them becoming a country. And look at what they've been able to do with the desert, from desalinization, it's a startup nation with all their technology, the ability that they respect all human life. I mean, this is a uniqueness and a bond that we should honor. And it's going to be a privilege to be able to be there amongst all of them and celebrate our relationship and for the next 75 years.